We all share a universal need to progress and realize our potential. And we believe that science is the key to unlocking that potential. Science takes you from the playground to the pros. And in our industry, we call this sales acceleration. Sales acceleration is not just a piece of software, it's a system, it's a platform, so you can reach the right customers in the right way at the right time. We understand your need to progress, and we believe that science is the key to measure, anticipate, and accelerate.
Welcome, everyone. This is Jim Steele. I'm President and Chief Customer Officer of Inside Sales, and I'm joining my partner and friend here, Eric Berridge, co-founder and CEO at Bluewolf, to talk about how data science plus prescriptive insights drive sales performance. I am really excited to join Eric on this webinar. He's been a good friend and a close partner of mine from the early Salesforce years. And it's no surprise that when I got to Inside Sales 5 months ago, Eric and Bluewolf were really the first partner that I reached out to help us at Inside Sales. We've had tremendous success together. He has amazing insight and experience as Salesforce's first partner. So what we're going to do, I'm going to turn over the mic here to Eric to share what he's seeing from his enterprise clients in handling this explosion of data. Then I'll share with you what we've been seeing at Inside Sales with data science and predictive analytics, and then Eric and I will open up the lines and take questions and hopefully provide you some great answers and some resources to help all of you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend and partner, Eric Berridge, co-founder and CEO of Bluewolf. Thanks, Eric, for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Jim. It's great to be a part of this today, and I appreciate you inviting me. At Bluewolf, for the past 15 years, as you mentioned, we've been helping organizations of all shapes and sizes to sell and service to their customers. We've primarily done that through the cloud, through a very tight partnership with Salesforce.com. And I think what we've really seen in the last 15 years is a drive to helping sales organizations and service organizations become more productive, get to their customers faster, and drive some business outcomes out of the cloud. But I think what we're seeing today is like something we've never seen before, and it really feels like we're on the cusp of something. I think you identified that when you made the move over to Inside Sales a few months ago. And it's all being driven out of this digital revolution, which I think for most organizations is creating a ton of opportunity, but it's probably also creating a lot of confusion and a lot of questions in terms of what we need to do next and what we need to do to harness all of this data. Because if you look at the global marketplace, IBM tells us that 90% of the data in the world today has been created in the last 2 years. I mean, we see these statistics all over the place now. Forrester said that most companies estimate they're only analyzing 12% of their data. I'd argue that that number is actually much smaller than that. If I look at most of the companies that we work with, particularly Consent, we're creating 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day. Now, I don't even know what a quintillion is. That seems like a tremendous amount of information that all of a sudden is exploding into the marketplace. Another statistic here, the total amount of data captured and stored doubles every 1.2 years. So the bottom line is, it's massive. And I think executives across every industry are recognizing that the most valuable companies in the world are exceeding data, right? Let's look at some examples. When you look at a company like LinkedIn, This is a company that has turned the world of recruiting and employment upside down. They've changed it forever, specifically because they've figured out how to harness social and data. Another great example is Uber, is completely upending the world of transportation, specifically because they've figured out how to network together consumers and drivers and transportation through a very simple application. Another great example is Twitter, right? Twitter just announced or just launched their live product where you can stream real-time video. Look at the statistics that we just talked about. Those numbers are only going to multiply by extreme factors in the coming 5 years. So data is everywhere, it's massive, and the most valuable companies in the world are exploiting data. And they're doing it either to connect people, or they're doing it to connect things, or they're doing it to connect people to things. The other thing to think about is that the cloud is making this data explosion easy, and it's making it live. Products like Salesforce, products like Inside Sales, products like Workday, all of these cloud applications are actually allowing for the consumption of this data in a way that organizations can move much faster than they could have if they had to put that infrastructure in place themselves. But when we think about data, we have to remind ourselves that it's only valuable if it can be presented and acted upon through simple applications. Because that's the other beauty of things like Uber and LinkedIn. They've figured out how to harness data through a very simple and easy to use interface. That's mobile, that's live, that's always on. So organizations and enterprises that are moving towards the best-in-class usage of data are not only harnessing this data, but they're also propagating it through simple-to-use applications that users can gravitate to and learn and use as productivity tools in their day-to-day lives. So when we think about data at Bluewolf and when we talk to customers, we really try to put it into 4 buckets. And in today's day and age, to harness this explosion of data, the first thing that we like to talk to customers about is the necessity of live data. The whole batch world that we've been living in for the past 50 years is coming to a close. Data that is live is data that can be acted upon. It's data that you can present to customers in real time. It's data that you can actually use to grow your enterprise. A great example of that is a client of ours, Sonova, which is an energy company, and they have people, thousands of people in the field all day long presenting pricing information to their customers. And that pricing data actually changes on an hourly basis. So to present relevant quotes, to present relevant information to their customers, they have to have live data. And Sonova's gone to great lengths to put a data management system in place that allows that data to be live in front of their customers. So that's the first tenet that we believe is very important in terms of harnessing data for your organization. It must be live. It also has to be clean. The information that your users and your executives rely on a daily basis has to be clean, and it has to be easy to use. A great example of that is a customer of ours, GlaxoSmithKline, that has thousands of people in the field calling on physicians and doctors. And these doctors move around a lot. They move between hospitals, between their practices, between clinics. And having the information about their whereabouts and their locations so that product can be shipped to them, so that orders can be placed, and so that visits can be made needs to be completely accurate. So having a data cleanliness strategy and having a data steward strategy in an organization is extremely important. Because with all this data, if it's not clean, it's irrelevant, and it actually causes more confusion for our customers. On top of that, to get clean data, it has to be mastered. Today we're living in an omni-channel world. Data is coming in through the internet, it's coming over the phone, it's coming through social media, it's coming through text, and organizations have to have a master record of their customer, of their product. So the best-in-class organizations today that are leveraging this data and doing the really cool things that we're going to talk about in a minute have taken the time and effort to put a data master plan in place. and to put master data management techniques in place so that there's always an upstream record that is the master that feeds the downstream engagement data that organizations rely on in front of their customers. And then lastly, your data has to be complete. With this explosion of data, very rarely do we see customers trying to pick and choose which data they want to capture. Most organizations, because of the cost of storage and because of the cloud is available, are choosing to capture every single piece of data that they can because they can't determine which nuggets of data are actually going to lead to the predictive insights that will ultimately lead to customer engagement and to increased value for their organizations. So in order to achieve these prescriptive insights that Jim will talk about in a few minutes, it requires organizations to collect and move massive amounts of data in real time. And we see best-in-class organizations doing that. Let's talk for a second about the 4 stages of analytics and how you eventually get to prescriptive. Most organizations today are kind of stuck in what we call the descriptive phase of analytics, which is really a rear-view mirror view of what's happened in the past. And a lot of organizations today can run reports and look at dashboards that tell them, hey, this is how much we sold last quarter or last month. This is how much we've put in the pipeline. This is how many cases we're currently trying to crank through in our customer service organization. And I think most organizations, for the most part, have nailed the descriptive piece of analytics. The next phase is really the diagnostic phase. Why did something happen? Why did we add X amount into our pipeline? Why do we have all of these customer service complaints? And that's the second stage that we see on the analytics maturity scale. I'd say probably about 50% of the organizations that we work with can actually answer the why question. But where this really gets interesting is when you can start to mine all of this data that you've collected that is complete, that's clean, that's live, and you can start to talk about what's going to happen next based upon prior action. And organizations that are moving into the best-in-class stages from an analytics perspective are really now moving into this predictive phase where they can look at why a customer might leave their organization based upon how many calls have been made into the call center over what topics, based upon what products maybe have not been shipped on time, based upon what phone calls haven't been answered. And an organization can grab all of that data, mix it with social data, and start to predict that, hey, these are customers that are unhappy, or these are customers that are ready to buy more, or these are customers that we need to get tighter with. And we're starting to see organizations step up and really take a crack at this predictive world, which is answering the question, what's going to happen next? And then the fourth holy grail portion of this, of our analytics maturity scale is talking about what to do about it. If we know what happened, if we know why it happened, if we now know what's likely to happen next, what's the next best action that we can put into the hands of a call center agent, that we can put into the hands of a sales rep, that we can put into the hands of a product specialist or an executive? How can we start to prescribe action in our organizations so that we're allocating our resource towards customer satisfaction and customer engagement? And that's what we're going to talk about in a few minutes here, because Inside Sales has some great solutions and they have a great message and a great approach to how prescriptive works. At the end of the day, why do we care? I always like to remind customers that before we get caught up in trying to capture all of our data, before we worry about master data management and live data, before we worry about what's the next best great cloud-based application that we can deploy, these are all technologies. They're all ripe with opportunity, but they're also all somewhat complex. And we always like to drive the conversation back to what's the business outcome that an organization is looking to achieve. And we believe there are 4 main economic drivers for business outcomes in an organization. Number 1, are you trying to acquire new customers? Are you trying to shorten your sales cycle and really look at how you're growing market share? Or number 2, are you looking at how you increase the amount of spend or the amount of engagement that you have with your existing customer base, which would be the expansion quadrant of business outcomes, and that's generally through incremental cross-sell, upsell, pricing changes. Then the third economic driver of a business outcome that we look at before we make a technology decision is around cost reduction. Can we reduce the cost that it takes to acquire and serve customers? Do we have too many sales reps out in the field just taking orders when we could actually create a self-serve channel that would be better for the customer as well as better for allocating that sales resource into an acquisitive mode? And then lastly, customer retention. Retaining customers and reducing customer churn, there's a tremendous opportunity to use predictive and prescriptive analytics to really identify those customers that need attention, that maybe need the next release of your product, that maybe need a more frequent visit from your sales organization or your executives. Using prescriptive and predictive analytics to really look at customer retention is what we're seeing a lot of enterprise organizations drive towards. And again, like I said, at the end of the day, you need a simple, easy-to-use application that can be the conduit for all of this data and that can drive the prescriptive behavior and that can drive the predictive behavior that organizations are looking for. So with that, Jim, I'll go ahead and hand it back to you. And thanks a lot for having me today, and I'll be on for questions at the end of.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. I think now everyone sees why you were Salesforce's best and first partner and why we expect that will be the same case here that now that I'm at Inside Sales. And I have been at Inside Sales for about 5 months after 12.5 years at Salesforce. And one of the great opportunities I had at Salesforce was to work with some very innovative, exciting companies, cloud companies, application companies, and great partners like Bluewolf, but none on the application side and platform side excited me as much as Inside Sales. For me, this was an opportunity to get on another rocket ship and do it all over again, a company that has the same kind of DNA and growth trajectory of Salesforce at this point in time when I joined in 2002. Also, our CEO, Dave Elkington, similar to Mark Benioff, he wants to change the world. He wants to disrupt the industry, and it's an exciting space. Leveraging data science with predictive analytics and machine learning to help sales teams make better, faster, smarter decisions to sell more revenue. I mean, that, to me, as a salesperson all my career, this is the holy grail, combining inside sales with companies like Salesforce and great partners like Bluewolf. And why is this such an exciting time? To me, we are seeing a sales revolution, a transformation to a new way of selling, and it's driven by this convergence of kind of 3 trends that have been going on. In the enterprise software space, companies like obviously Salesforce have been pioneers in the cloud for 15 years, driving a new way of deploying technology over the internet. Much like the internet disruption back in the 90s, companies like Amazon and Google, and the way Amazon knows more about our buying behavior than we do and tells us what we need to buy next based on all of their predictive analytics and data science. And sales, what this is doing to the sales methodology is the same kind of thing. You know, I grew up in a very different era of selling when it was all about relationships and really the longer tenure you had in sales, the better you were. Well, companies don't have that luxury these days. They need to find salespeople that can be instantly successful and deliver results. It's no longer about just pipeline management and activity management the old-fashioned way. And I think what's happened is this explosion in data that Eric was talking about with quintillions of data points, and that's a new term we'll all be talking about. And the technology that's now in the desktops allow millennials that are equipped with these tools to help them target the right prospects with the right messages at the right time. And Eric referred to this explosion in data, and Stephanie Buscemi from Salesforce, she's the SVP of Marketing for Big Data and Analytics, she presented this slide a few weeks ago at a World Tour event of Salesforce, and she said that 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 12 months, yet less than 1% is actually being analyzed to understand customer buying behavior, then applying predictive analytics for future customer buying behavior, and then on top of it, prescribing sales activities to drive deals to closure. This is a very small percent of all this data is actually being leveraged for competitive advantage. Now we see our addressable space being between the marketing automation space and the CRM space. Both of these application areas have had tremendous technology advancements and investments by customers in the last 15 years. Most notably on the CRM side with companies like Salesforce, and then marketing automation with ExactTarget and Marketo and HubSpot, Eloqua. All of these companies have produced some amazing technology, but where we see the opportunity is once these marketing campaigns are completed and the leads come in, there's tremendous leakage between the leads and the opportunities, and that's where the opportunity is to help salespeople capture these leads and turn them into opportunities and eventually drive revenue. We were in Europe about 2 weeks ago, and we conducted a response audit for 3,000 companies that were attending the Salesforce World Tour event in London. And of the 3,000 companies we analyzed, and by the way, this data also applies to the response audits we've done in the U.S., 37% of these companies had no online web forms to capture leads. So you get on their website, you say, yes, I'm interested, I want to buy your product, and there's no way to actually contact that company or have them contact you. Of the ones that did have web forms, only 46% of those companies responded to the web leads that we filed within 4 days, and the average first response time by telephone was over 24 hours. Now, all of our data and the science we've applied to it, our research, shows that contacting these leads, it's very important to do so within the first hour. Your highest likelihood to reach that customer is within that first hour, and companies are hemorrhaging revenue that they don't even know about, and they don't know how to prioritize all these leads, so they're throwing lots of bodies and time at it, but it's very manual, it's very time consuming, and it's very expensive, and it's not very efficient. So how do we address this problem? Well, we help companies prioritize the leads with which ones have the highest propensity to buy and the highest propensity to contact at any given point in time. And we do this with a crowdsourcing model across all of our customers and lots of public information. You can see we get company information, firmographic information, demographic information about the individual buyers, geographic information, psychographic, which matches the salespeople that are the best fit for any particular customer or prospect profiles, histographic market information, and we have this huge database of 15 billion sales transactions and 110 million buyer profiles, and thousands of data points from the public domain that we use to sort through to provide the predictive analytics. And with the data, we can then predict what, based on past behavior, what the customer buying behavior will be. We go through a validation process. This is all through machine learning. We then track the responses, which gives visibility to what's working and what's not. And then we prescribe to the sales people the activities, whether they call the customer at that point in time, whether they email them at an optimal point in time, or text them, so that they have a higher likelihood to actually call that customer, connect with that customer, and ultimately close that business. And this is all done through this data science neurolytics platform, as we call it, that Inside Sales has innovated with in the last 11 years. So as Eric mentioned, none of this matters if there isn't a real business outcome, and all of this harnessing of data and data science is all about tangible results. And this is where we look to our customer success stories, and ADP being a great one, where they achieve tremendous productivity increases with the technology tools to drive 88% increase in number of dials, 86% increase in number of proposals delivered, but most importantly, 32% increase in deals closed. And the same with Outbound Engine, achieving 30% increase in contact rate, 19% increase in deal size, and 24% increase in revenue.
Thanks, Jim. We're excited to welcome Lindsay Armstrong, our Senior Vice President of International Strategies at InsideSales.com, to help us out here with the Q&A at the end. Jim has to jump off onto a quick sales call, always selling. We're going to have Lindsay go over a few offers that we have today, and then she'll pass it over to Eric to explain a little bit about one of the offers that they have. And then we will moderate a few questions of Q&A. Lindsay?
Great. Thanks, guys. And it was great to hear Jim's views on where we are with predictive analytics at the moment. So if we look at some of the offers that we have, the first thing I'd like to draw everyone's attention to is an ebook from C9. C9, as many of you are aware, is a recent acquisition that Inside Sales has made. It's essentially a predictive forecasting tool. It's tremendous. We heard Jim talk about having 15 billion sales transactions, which is what we analyze. Well, sound back, because when we add the C9 data, we'll be analyzing a total of roughly 80 billion transactions to be able to make everyone's sales decisions better. That's 80 billion transactions. Nobody else can do that. It's pretty amazing. There's also another ebook. Eric, do you want to take us through that one?
Yeah, absolutely, Lindsay. Thank you. So we have a great sales guide that we call The Changing Role of Sales. And really what this guide talks about is how selling organizations are becoming more important than mere product features when it comes to selecting and buying a product. And this guide really talks to how do you ease the friction and get rid of the friction that sits within the current purchasing cycles that many customers have. And it also talks to the data equation and talks about how to leverage all of this data to shorten sales cycles, increase win rates, and get more productivity out of your selling organization. So we're very excited to offer that up as a guide to all attendees of the webinar.
The third thing that I'd draw everyone's attention to as well is we've got an infographic up there on best practices for lead response time. So Inside Sales is really super interested in how different companies respond to leads in different times. This infographic talks a little bit about what's the right time to call somebody back on a lead, what are the right day, what are the right circumstances under which leads have the best opportunity to get a response. And we also do response audits as well, which analyze the response times of individual companies and how their web responses differ from their peers. So that's another great service that we offer.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. If the audience wants to go ahead and use the Q&A console, you can put some questions in now, and we'll start taking some questions from the audience. Those downloads that they talked about, they are available on the right-hand side of the webinar console. It looks like a few questions are coming in here. The first one comes from Joe, and he says, how can predictive analytics empower customer-facing employees? Eric, why don't you take that one?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Joe, and thanks for being a part of the webinar today. Hopefully you found it valuable. I think a lot of what we touched upon over the past half hour kind of speaks to this question. But I think the real key is, we've been operating in this world of business intelligence for the past 25 years that is really chart and graphic focused, and it's typically focused on a very specific set of users in an organization. Where we see predictive going is really empowering line managers and really empowering the employees that are right in front of the customers. The only way to do that is to really elevate the way we look at data and elevate it in a manner where data is actually being fed to end users onto mobile devices, onto the desktop, in a mobile world, so that ultimately that end user is actually being told what the next best action is instead of being asked to analyze a bunch of data, right? Predictive is about telling the end user and telling even the customer what's going to happen next, and that has to be done through very simple-to-use interfaces. It has to be done 24/7. It has to be done in real time. So we think those are some of the components and some of the themes that are really important when you look at how predictive ultimately can empower customer-facing employees.
If I could just add a quick point to that very often serving up data, it doesn't help, particularly new or green inside sales reps. We really need to tell them what the data means and what they want to do with the data. What's the next action that they take with the data? And in some ways, I think predictive analytics brings experience to those people where they actually don't have that experience. So it's all of the experience of those 15 billion transactions that we talked about. It's that accumulated sales knowledge distilled and then served up to someone who actually doesn't have that experience but is able to benefit from it in a way that has never been able to happen before.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, when you network this data together and when you can actually show an end user or a customer-facing employee that this has worked before, it actually answers the why question, which ultimately is going to create that powerful moment in front of the customer.
Great, thanks you guys. The next question comes in from Naomi, and it is, how do you see Salesforce evolving as more customer data becomes available?
That's a great question. I think that Salesforce will increasingly become the customer engagement engine for many enterprise organizations. Gartner already ranked Salesforce as the #1 CRM vendor in the world, and they have for the past several years. But ultimately, taking all of that data and making sure that Salesforce is open and has the ability to capture data from all of these different channels, really in an omni-channel way, is going to be very important to their future, as well as making sure that their user interface and the way that they put tools into the hands of users in a mobile-first world, that is going to become a very important part of their evolution. They obviously have a good start with Salesforce One. They have a great start with how they're currently using Salesforce Wave as their analytics engine. But ultimately, it's going to be how quickly can they serve that data into the hands of customer-facing employees in a way that enables that next best action. And that's kind of how we look at Salesforce's evolution over the next couple of years.
I think it's not just about the next best action as well. It's serving that data up in a way which is immediate to the people receiving the data and is actionable, immediately actionable by them, as opposed to, again, just a chart or just a dashboard. I think if you think about how great Salesforce dashboards were a few years ago, think about how great analytics and predictive analytics are going to be. They're kind of like what dashboards would have loved to have been a couple of years ago.
Right. You know, one other point there, I think if you look at the investment that they've made around Lightning Connect on the back end, that's all about them realizing that the only way Salesforce is going to provide value as an aggregation of corporate data and of social data is if it's very easy to get data into their application. And that's why they've also been investing in the Lightning Connect product.
Great, thanks guys. The next question comes in from Jamie, and it says, what's the primary barrier for companies to start utilizing their data?
I don't know that there is a primary data, and thank you I don't know that there's a primary barrier, and thank you for that question, Jamie. You know, there are barriers, there are challenges, but there are also incredible opportunities on the other side of those barriers and of those challenges. And it depends, I think, where your organization sits from a maturity perspective when it comes to the organization of your corporate data and when it comes to the modern nature of your customer-facing applications. You know, it's very important that organizations have an MDM strategy in place. Like we talked about earlier, it's very important that your data is not siloed. And for some companies, that does require investment to getting to a point where you can share data in real time in an aggregate format across your entire enterprise. For other companies, it's really a matter of just making sure you have a platform to present that data. It's a matter of working with products like Inside Sales and Salesforce in conjunction. It's also a matter of engaging your CMO and making sure that you're grabbing data pre-customer acquisition so that you understand what's going on with your demand funnel. Those are some of the common barriers that we see in our customer base, and you know, again, it depends on the customer's unique situation.
I think the primary barrier for most customers that I talk to is that they have a lot of data. They have so much data, but they can't access it in a way that's meaningful to them. They can't access it in a time frame that is meaningful to them. And so they continue to collect data, which effectively just takes up space. And I think one of the things that we'll see in the future, I think there'll be a greater awareness of what data matters. It's not just a question of collecting everything and analyzing nothing. It will be a question of collecting data which can be reasonably and quickly analyzed to deliver ROI and immediate effect into the business, as opposed to, we've got loads of data and we're proud of it.
Perfect, thank you. This next question is a three-part question, and it's probably better if Lindsay takes the first stab at this one because it's around the 80 billion data points. It comes in from Vanette. Hopefully I said that right. And it is that the proprietary data, C9 and Inside Sales?
Yes, it is. It's our data. And it's a combination of the data sources of all of the transactions that Inside Sales have conducted over the last, 10 years, and the transactions that have been collected by C9.
And then the second part of that question is can it be supplemented with other data the client might already have? That's a great question because when we look, let's just focus on that old 15 billion records of Inside Sales data. So there's 15 billion sales transactions, but supplemented on that and to teach our Neurolytics engine and to educate it, we feed in dozens and dozens of other data sources on top of that. We feed in weather information. We feed in sports results. We feed in what's going on in the political climate in various parts of the world and in various regions. So, we supplement it with lots and lots of different resources, but also so can our customers. Great, thank you.
Was that a three-part question, Mike?
There was a three-part question. The end part was kind of, their question is, what does the engine, what is it attached to, such as Hadoop or other big data sources?
You're going to have to, you could probably take that question better than me, actually, Mike.
I thought that maybe we could to explain that one, it may take a while. I thought maybe we could just reach out to Vinette and we could clarify that a little bit more. So we'll table the third part of that question, and we'll reach out to you, Vinette. The last question that we'll take today is also it comes from Thomas, and he says, my data is in disparate systems. Can you dive into more depth about how I can consolidate that data so that it can be analyzed? And this is maybe something that we've covered a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds like a classic MDM conversation, and I know that's an intimidating word for some folks. But the truth of the matter is, ultimately, you need to find a data store that is going to act as the master for your data records. Even prior to that, you want to be doing analysis as to what you want to actually be tracking. And typically, this is around customer data. And typically, the need is driven by sales or marketing. Sitting down with those business leaders and understanding the types of things that we want to start to track and how we want to act on that data, whether it's through the execution of marketing campaigns or sales campaigns or cross-selling, upselling, understanding the data elements and arriving at what elements you want to capture will then put you in a position to really determine how complex your effort is going to be, which then puts you in a position to establish that master data record. And typically that can be done in the cloud. It can be done within Salesforce. It can be done on Amazon. It can be done in a very simple fashion to set up that master environment that can feed your customer engagement systems. There's probably a more detailed conversation than that, but I would leave you with the guidance that master data management has typically been a pretty intimidating topic, particularly in IT over the past 25 years. But with the advent of the cloud and with the availability of all this data, it doesn't have to be. So hopefully that helps.
Great. Hey, I might cheat in one last question here from Samuel. And he says that we can all agree people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so his question is, what are your insights on getting this data into our sales or getting this data to our sales reps in an easy-to-use tool?
Sure. I mean, I think you have to start in the rep's shoes, right? And one of the things that we do here at Bluewolf is we spend a lot of time with our customers' selling organization, where we'll actually go out and we'll do rep rides to understand what a day in the life is for a selling individual. And we do the same thing on the service side. What is a day in the life of a service rep? And the reason we do that is when you go through those exercises, you start to gain a real appreciation for what types of applications they can use in a selling moment, what types of applications they can use in the field, whether they're riding around in cabs or on subways or driving long distances between client sites where they may not have internet connectivity. Once you start to get an appreciation for what that day in the life is, you can actually begin to figure out what simple applications you can put in their hands that will feed the data that is going to make their lives more productive. And that's really the key. We tend to take a view that a selling person needs all the data all the time and they need the proverbial 360-degree view of the customer, when in reality they don't need that. When in reality, when they're in front of a customer, they need very specific things that you can feed them through mobile devices, through offline applications that are easy to access, that might be voice activated, and actually act as productivity enhancers instead of some application that they feel like they need to enter their data into so that they don't lose their job. So that would be my recommendation for how you ultimately decide what the right applications are to put in the hands of your users.
I think adding to that, which I completely agree with, having carried a quota for, 35 years, one other thing that I think is coming to the fore these days is I think the benefits need to be easily measurable by normal people, by which I mean, the benefit of having an application shouldn't take a team of 1,000 consultants and spreadsheets that I'm not smart enough to understand to figure out if I'm getting ROI. I think benefits need to be much simpler, much more transparent, and the sort of thing that a normal person could write down on a piece of paper and deliver to the CEO. And I think that's been missing, if I'm honest, from lots of parts of IT for a long time. And it's certainly something that I think our inside sales customers really, really like about our product, that it's very, very clear whether they're getting good ROI or not.
Right. It gets back to those business outcomes that we talked about earlier.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot. I think we'll sum it up with that. And I want to thank Lindsay and Eric for helping out with Q&A, and then once again for Eric and Jim for their content today. Just as a reminder on your guys' way out, we're going to make sure that this webinar is available on demand. We will email you that link. It's also the same link that you used to log in today. So if you want to share this, or if you want to come back in and re-listen to it, you can do so that way. And then the last thing is, on the way out, you'll get what's called an exit survey that will pop up on your screen. We just want to know how we're doing, how you guys like our content. You could respond to that question. And then if there's anybody that is interested in things that we've talked about today, either with Bluewolf or with Inside Sales, you can let us know what you're interested in, and we'll contact you as soon as possible. Thanks again, everybody. We'll sign off now.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.